What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to basketball. And more importantly, welcome back to our season preview series, the series where we're going to break down every single NBA team before the start of the regular season. We're going to go very in-depth with this video. We're going to talk about things like rotations, what's their depth chart look like, what's their salary cap situation, what kind of assets do they have, what did their off-season look like, everything you need to be ready for the start of the regular season. In this video, we have the Sacramento Kings, so hey, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment. I've responded to every single comment on my YouTube channel up to this point, and I intend to keep on doing so. All right, let's get into it. All right, y'all, as you can see, we've got a lot of things to cover, so make sure you guys strap in and get ready. We're back here on the season preview spreadsheet. For those of you that don't know, I build these spreadsheets to kind of help articulate the story and help visualize things better for these videos. If you want access to the spreadsheet, it's pretty simple. All you have to do is leave a comment down below saying, I would like access to the spreadsheet or something along those lines. I can figure it out. I'll then give you a link to my Discord. Hop on the Discord. You guys should hop on the Discord regardless. It's a lot of fun. We have some good chats on there. But anyway, once you're on there, shoot me a DM just saying, hey, I'd like access to the spreadsheet. I'll give it to you nice and easy. I've given it out to quite a few people so far, and it's been a pretty successful thing. So if you guys want access to it, there you go. By the way, if you guys are looking behind me, I understand it's a mess right there. I'm very sick right now. I'm not even asking for pity or anything like that. I better not see any pity comments. I'm just sick, and this is my dwelling at the moment. The wifey doesn't want me anywhere else but in here, so if I sound a little gross or if I have a coughing fit, I'll cut it out, but just know that's what's happening over here. But anyway, we've got the Sacramento Kings to talk about today, and I'm actually very much looking forward to hearing about this one because I feel like there's going to be a lot of different opinions about the Kings, right? They had a very interesting offseason where I don't know if they got like a ton better. I feel like we all agree that they got better, but I've seen a lot of varying like opinions as to how good this team is now. So we've seen the Kings really have a nice stretch after not being in the playoffs for a long time. They've kind of had a couple seasons in a row now where they've been pretty competitive. The Fox-Sabonis duo has been a very big success for them, which is absolutely awesome. We're seeing guys like Keegan Murray start to come into their own, and obviously the DeMar DeRozan trade happened this offseason. So where do we see this team? Well, last year they were 46-36, which is a good record. The West is really, really tough. We understand that there's a lot of teams kind of feeding off each other. I still have this team as a contender. These are the different categories, if you guys weren't curious. This team's trying to win a championship. Do we think that they can realistically do that? That's probably up for discussion, but that's certainly what they're trying to do at this moment. And now, what are some goals for this team? I want you guys to remember these goals as we go throughout the rest of this video because these will be talking points for us throughout the rest of them. First goal, figure out how DeMar DeRozan and Sabonis work together. The Kings have probably my favorite offense in the entire NBA. For those of you that don't know, I run a basketball consulting company. It mostly revolves around analytics, but there's certainly times where I help them implement certain playbooks. I do things like scouting and stuff. I have one NBA client now. It's pretty cool. My business is a pretty substantial size, but anyway, I helped 2 or 3 D1 teams last year implement the Kings' actual offense into their current offense, and we saw incredible results out of it. And a lot of it revolves around having a very dominant and smart big man that can pass off the nail, which is the free throw line extended, and it's really cool. It's basically hub offense is what a lot of people are starting to call it. I know I've seen JJ Redick call it that a couple times. That's what I like to call it. It's just hub offense. And so how do we make Sabonis and DeRozan work with that? Because DeRozan likes to operate in that area, and he usually likes to have the ball. I'm not saying he can't play without it, but it's going to be interesting. Because we've seen a lot of DeMar DeRozan's success come when he has the basketball, and he's proven that he can actually be a pretty good playmaker when he's in that position too. He's just a good player to have in that spot, but this is a core part of who the Kings really are. So how are we going to use DeRozan off of Sabonis? Because look, Fox he's trying to get to the rim off a lot of these looks. And we all know DeRozan, while he's improved from the outside and he's been more willing to take threes, it's still not something that teams are all that concerned about taking away from him. They'd much rather prevent him from touching the basketball and get to his operating areas because we all know how deadly he can be from there. So I'm very curious to see how you make that work. Next thing, address the big man depth. We'll get into it later in the video when we look at the depth chart itself, but it just seems like there's a bit of a hole there right now as to okay, Sabonis comes out of the game, what kind of happens after that? It seems like they might have to go to some smaller lineups at times. They do have interesting options, but I wouldn't call them great options by any means. So something to think about there. And then make Keegan Murray a star, right? How good can Keegan Murray be? I'm personally very, very high on Keegan Murray. I think he can be an incredible player. I've seen a lot of skill development over him, or a lot of development in him over his first couple of years in the NBA. And I think given the way that the current NBA is set up, it's so hard to bring and more talent. Nowadays, you have to develop your own talent, and this guy could be really, 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 really good, in my opinion. So how do we continue to develop Keegan Murray into the kind of player that we need to take this team to the next level? I guess we'll find out. But anyway, let's talk about what their offseason looked like. So it was a bulky offseason for the Sacramento Kings. We've got a couple different categories of like player movement going on in here. By the way, go watch the first couple videos in this series if you want a deeper explanation as to how all of this works. Just go there. But we have drafted players, so players that they drafted, obviously pretty easy. Player departures, players that were on the team last year that are no longer on the team. And then players brought in, players that weren't on the team last year that are now on the team, right? So let's start off with the drafted players and Devin Carter. I think a lot of us had a pretty good feeling that Devin Carter was going to end up in the Sacramento Kings. And then especially when they traded Davion Mitchell afterwards, just seemed all like a foregone conclusion that like, yeah, this is where this guy's probably going to end up. Devin Carter is injured to start the season. So while he will be included in like kind of the ideal depth chart and rotation and everything, he is going to be out for a pretty good amount of time this year. I think it was a shoulder injury or something like that. But hopefully what you're going to get in Devin Carter is a more mature point guard that'll come off the bench, play some really good defense. He's pretty good at attacking and getting to the rim. He's not much of a playmaker as of right now, but he was at least competent in like his last year or two in college from behind the arc. So hopefully you're getting a 3-and-D kind of point guard out of him that could play like alongside of like De'Aaron Fox, because he's not like that small and he does have some size to him, and you're already playing guys like Keon Ellis anyway, so it's not a huge deal. So I think it was a good pickup for them at the end of the day. All right, let's talk about player departures, because there were quite a bit of them. I will say it's not like that big of a deal, though. There was kind of some, I don't want to call it nonsense. All these guys have value, right? I want to be very careful with how I phrase things with certain players, because like all these dudes have value and like all these guys are really, really good. Sometimes situations just don't mesh or something else. Whenever you're describing a player as not that good, I think it's important to talk about why that is. So just something to keep in mind as you guys are in the comments and everything. First one of their starters, Harrison Barnes, is gone. Harrison Barnes has had really good moments for them and then some not so good moments. He was pretty good in like the playoffs, I felt, for them last season, or at least in like the postseason play. 3-and-D forward. He was part of the DeMar DeRozan trade. He's on his way to San Antonio now. I think he's in a great place now that he's just gets a chance to really develop and not develop, help develop like a younger group and everything. I think that's a really good role for him at this point. So it would be an unfortunate loss for them because they don't have a lot of these sizable wings on the team, but they did make a pickup that we will talk about. Davion Mitchell was probably the last like rotation player that they lost, and now he was in and out of the rotation, but at the end of last season he was really, really good for them. His rookie campaign was really nice with like the defense that he brought, and his shooting was pretty solid, but it kind of just continued to fall off like the further he got into his career. But he kind of found it at the end of last season. I believe he was traded to Toronto, so that's where he's at now. And again, you have Devin Carter as kind of a replacement for that. It's not going to happen immediately, but I mean, I guess we'll see, right? I mean, Devin Carter should be equal to, if not better than, Davion Mitchell would be my assumption, so not too worried about it. We got Sasha Venzikov now, who I believe got bought out by Toronto. I don't know, you guys correct me in the comments or something. Pretty much just a catch and shoot guy, tough veteran type guy, so he might just end up back overseas. I don't know. JaVale McGee, basically just team captain, team leader type guy, just been around the NBA for a while. If you put him in, still good for a run, jump, and dunk every once in a while, but hasn't been picked up quite yet. Kessler Edwards, kind of just like a guy they've been trying to see if he could become anything. Nothing's really stood out in terms of his skill set that really says like, hey, this guy could be really good at this, he could be really good at this. He got some decent size to him, but hasn't really been a factor for this team yet, so nothing quite there. And then Chris Duarte, also part of the DeMar DeRozan trade. He's on his way to Chicago, had a really promising rookie year for Indiana, and then just hasn't quite been able to find it ever since, given he hasn't had the greatest opportunity. But he's also like in between positions. He probably should be like a wing for his level of athleticism and ball handling, but like given he's only like 6'4", like it's kind of hard to throw him in those spots, and the shooting hasn't quite come around, but again, hasn't gotten consistent minutes. I don't know. He wasn't necessary on this team. So who did they bring in to replace these guys? Well, the Harrison Barnes replacement is DeMar DeRozan, and I think we'd all know on paper that DeMar DeRozan is just a better player than Harrison Barnes, right? Like maybe the defensive ceiling isn't quite as high, but I think you're probably going to get a pretty similar level. And obviously there's the closing ability of him, the leadership and everything. He's just a better player than Harrison Barnes. So does bringing in DeMar DeRozan make this team that much better? I don't know, because it doesn't seem like as natural of a fit as I would like it to be. So I don't know exactly. I don't know how much better this really makes the team. At the end of the day, you did get a better player, and you didn't give up much to do it because it was just like some second round picks, Harrison Barnes and Chris Duarte, like we talked about. So you do that trade every single time. I just personally don't think it moved the needle a ton, but why wouldn't you do it still? Like, it's so hard to get players like this nowadays, and this was a good way to go and do it. So there you go. You do have one of the craziest like clutch duos now between De'Aaron Fox and DeMar DeRozan, so good for you guys. You did bring in another lengthy wing in Jalen McDaniels. Unlike his brother, he hasn't quite found his footing yet, hasn't quite brought it on the defensive end quite as much as, again, his brother has, but you still get a lengthy athletic wing guy that maybe under the right circumstances here in Sacramento, maybe he can turn into a rotational player for you. Curious to see. They brought in Jordan McLaughlin, a guy that I've actually been a pretty decent fan of throughout most of his career. He hasn't always been the most effective on the basketball court at all times, but I like his game. He plays with a lot of energy. He really tries to spark something whenever he gets in there. Obviously, he's a little bit undersized, but at least he's played like a decent amount of NBA minutes. So while you don't have Devin Carter right now, McLaughlin should serve as a decent backup point guard option for you until Carter gets back and kind of gets back into game shape. So at least you got a guy that's been around the league for a little while. And then you got Orlando Robinson. I don't know what's up with his picture here. This should be from like the NBA website itself that these pictures are pulled from. So I don't know why Orlando Robinson got done dirty here. I don't know what to do with him because like he's got a ton of size and he's just really bulky in that sense, but I don't know. I just haven't seen enough out of Orlando Robinson to have like a true opinion on him or to tell you that you should be excited about him, maybe is how I should put it. So I don't know. He's on the team now. He's probably better than JaVale McGee at this point. So I guess you can consider that an upgrade for a reserve big man spot. But nonetheless, it's not the craziest offseason ever. They didn't lose anything that major. They had a nice draft selection. They made a good trade. Then they've got some other kind of supplementary pieces. So it's kind of hard to judge this team as to like how much better they got. I think they definitely got better and they positioned themselves pretty good. I don't know. It's nothing like necessarily to write home about, at least in my opinion, but curious to hear your guys' thoughts, obviously. But all right, let's talk about depth chart, salary, and all the things like that. All right, so this is my favorite tab on this entire like workbook. Those of you that followed the Ideal Offseason series know that this is pretty much what that was at the end of the day. So there's a couple things on this sheet. Obviously, we have like salaries and everything. We have a depth chart. We have draft picks owned, and then we have a salary cap table. So we'll cover all of those things in here and go as in depth as possible with like each of these players and these assets and things like this. So I want to start off with the draft picks because it's not a crazy amount of draft picks. I will note that some of the picks not listed here that are the Kings, they do have protections on them. So they could get them back. They could not get them back. It depends on where all their standings actually fall out. And that includes their 2025 first round pick, just an FYI. But otherwise, the Kings have done a pretty good job of managing their assets. Like they're in control of like all their first round picks really going forward, which is good. So if you need to do something to make a trade at some point, you can go and do that because this team's probably not going to be bad enough to get a really good pick. So you got to be able to use these picks somehow, and you still have access to all of them, which is awesome. You've only used a couple of your second round picks, like you said, or like we mentioned earlier, to get like DeMar DeRozan. Awesome, right? That's an amazing use of assets. So while this team isn't like beaming with draft picks and stuff like that, they do have access to like all of theirs going forward, which is good. They can use them. Somebody is going to be willing to take them for some sort of player in some capacity. So it's good that they have access to that stuff. You guys ever cough so hard that it feels like you're going to give yourself a hernia or something like that? That's kind of what it feels like right now. But anyway, let's talk about the salary cap space in itself. If you guys want a deeper explanation as to the 4 levels of this, go watch like the first video or 2 of this series. That's a Celtics and Grizzlies video. I go into a lot more detail as to what all these mean. But in essence, here's what you need to know. There's 4 levels to like the salary cap and everything. There's the actual cap itself. There's a line there. Then we have a luxury tax line right there. That's when teams start to get a little more expensive. Then you have a first apron and a second apron. Those are a little bit newer, and you're going to hear a lot of people talk about them because they're very confusing and most people don't understand them yet. In essence, what you need to know is the NBA doesn't want people just trading their star players all the time now. They want to make it very difficult to do so. They want players to stay where they're at for as long as possible because that's better for ratings. That's better for like player or fan engagement, things like that. I personally like it. I think it's better for the league and everything, and I just happen to enjoy it. You're obviously entitled to your own opinions, but that's just Just my thinking on it. But as soon as you get into these aprons, they make it very difficult for you to start bringing in new players and to trade players. Essentially, if you want to bring in better players, once you already have this, once you're in the apron, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really, really hard. They're going to basically force you to go backwards and then try to go forwards again. So very, very complicated. But let's talk about where the Kings are currently at. So they've passed the cap and they've passed luxury tax, meaning that they can't sign anybody for more than a minimum. But they haven't hit the apron yet, and that's huge, especially considering they only have, they do actually have a roster spot left, and if they were to sign somebody to a minimum, like, they're not going to hit the first apron based off that, and they can also, like, release somebody else if they want to. We'll talk about Orlando Robinson in a second, because only $500K of his salary is guaranteed. If you want to get rid of him at some point, that $500K still sticks on here, but you could sign 2 minimum contract dudes, like maybe you're playing in the buyout market or something like that, and you're still not going to hit the first apron. So you're in a pretty decent spot there. But this also gives you the ability to make some trades and have some flexibility there. If the right player becomes available, you've got a little bit of wiggle room before you're going to actually hit the first apron, which is good. So they're in a good situation considering like the amount of talent that they actually have on this team. They're almost $7 million away from that first apron. So good for the Kings, man. They're being managed pretty well here between the cap and the actual draft picks. Another good thing about the Kings is they have a lot of expiring money that isn't that important. So going into next offseason, let's just like delete these really quick and just see like all of a sudden, like we haven't hit luxury tax yet. We've got another like $20 million or so. So, you know, you can do something with that, right? And it's not going to cost that much to bring any of these guys back if you really want to. So that's exciting. But nonetheless, let's talk about who's on the team right now. Domantas Sabonis, making the most amount of money. Very, very good basketball player. One of the better centers that we have in basketball. Again, he's kind of able to do a bit of everything. He's a solid defender. He's extremely physical, great around the rim, good passer, steps outside and hits every once in a while, which is great. Great center to have. Him and De'Aaron Fox have been awesome together. Talking about De'Aaron Fox and his growth in the NBA, he's found a way to use his athleticism and combine it with some better decision making and skill moves and things like that to really get to his spots on the court. He's become an extremely effective point guard in the NBA. Probably one of the more underrated guys and one of the most clutch players that we have in the league. So you've got a great 1-2 punch in those two. Got DeMar DeRozan. Obviously, we've already talked about him a pretty good amount. So DeRozan is brought onto this team. He is an upgrade, but how does he fit into the offense? It's a little bit confusing, so I guess we'll see at the end of the day how that fits in. Malik Monk is a very interesting one. I know a lot of Kings fans didn't think that they would end up getting him back. I didn't personally think that it was going to work out great for them. I know a lot of Orlando Magic fans were like, we're going to get Malik Monk. Magic fans thought they were getting everybody this offseason. I was like, I don't think you guys realize nobody wants to live in Orlando. Have y'all been to Orlando? Nobody likes Orlando. But anyway, Malik Monk is a perfect example of somebody that everybody's known how talented he is, but when you're put in bad situations, it's so hard to be good at basketball. There's just so much else that goes into these guys, and I hope you guys remember this. Like, these are people that live entire lives outside of these basketball games and courts. And so when you're drafted by a franchise like Charlotte, Hornets fans, we hope things are getting better for you. We truly do. But when Malik Monk was drafted there, it wasn't good. And he just could not figure out where he was at. He had bad people around him all the time. He couldn't get it figured out. Goes to the Lakers. All of a sudden, he starts to become a little bit something. Comes here. This is obviously his perfect ideal situation. He's playing with one of his best friends in De'Aaron Fox. All of a sudden, dude's sixth man of the year, right? Like, that's how good he is. He's one of the better scorers we have. They were unfortunately missing him in the playoffs last year, and that was a huge blow for them. But Malik Monk is one of the best scorers that we have coming off the bench in the league nowadays. His athleticism and his energy is phenomenal. So a phenomenal player to have, and he's on a pretty good salary locked up for the next couple of years. Then we have Kevin Huerter, who is probably the Kings' favorite trade piece at the moment, like at least by the fans' stake. Kevin Huerter was a 3-and-D player for Atlanta for a long time. He had a pretty rough season last season. I think, and we don't know, I'd be willing to bet that he's probably going to figure it out. Like, you never know. Some guys just kind of fall off, but I'd find it hard to believe that dude just forgot how to play basketball, and he should be in a pretty conducive environment to have some success. I think he just had a rough season. Who knows what was going on behind the scenes or anything like that. So we will probably in this video explore a trade for him in some capacity, but let's just hope that he can kind of get things figured out, because he would be a valuable guy to have on this team. He's got some size, he can space the floor, right? He's a guy that could be a starter on this team even if he gets back to what he was, so let's hope he gets it figured out. We have Keegan Murray after this. I talked about how much I love Keegan Murray. We've seen him develop already a ton in his very short NBA career. He does have a team option at the end of the season. That's certainly going to get picked up going into his third season now. So Keegan Murray was a great outside shooter when he came in. He's a good athlete. He knows how to find space on the floor. Very smart basketball player. Where we saw him really develop last season, all of a sudden now he's guarding better defenders and having more success. It's like, okay, we've got a little bit of a defender in him now. And then at the end of last season, we started seeing him put the ball on the floor. And that's where you were like, ooh, wait a second here. Wait a second. This power forward can handle the rock. So when Sabonis was out of the game, all of a sudden he's controlling things. He's got great pace with the ball. He's catching, guys are closing him out because he's such a good shooter. He's ripping, getting to the paint, and then you see him like pause and stuff. He's reading the floor. He's not just rushing like a lot of young players do. He's like reading, surveying, and he's making the skip pass to an open guy. Or he then is like, no, actually I'm going to take this the whole way and use my athleticism and finish over you. Or he's kicking it out, re-space, and getting a 3-point shot back. So I'm like, okay, there's something here. I know we like to run things out of Sabonis, but we also have to balance making sure we make this guy as good as possible, right? So how do we start to balance that stuff? Hard to say. Jalen McDaniels, we talked about him a little bit already. Same with Devin Carter. Alex Len is probably going to operate as the backup center. At least he's been in the NBA for a while. But if you remember, I said one of the goals is probably to find a better option than Alex Len. I don't know. He's got size and he can protect the paint a little bit. I wouldn't call him great. I wouldn't call him bad, certainly by any means. It's probably a decent upgrade spot for them, right? It's hard to find big men right now, but I don't know. Maybe we can go see what's out there. We talked about Jordan McLaughlin a little bit, so let's talk about Kobe Jones. Kobe was a rookie for them last season, didn't play a ton of minutes. He's going to slide in as a reserve guard this year, so we'll see if anything really comes of that, but nonetheless, he's kind of just here on the team as a cheap option, which is good. I'll skip down to Orlando Robinson again. We talked about not all of his contracts guaranteed, so if you need to get rid of him, you certainly can. And then you got Keon Ellis, who was a very fun surprise last season. I certainly didn't see it coming. Keon Ellis, probably the starting 2 guard for you this year, was a really, really good defender. And then all of a sudden we found out, oh, this dude can get some buckets too. They threw him in kind of at the end of last season. All of a sudden, he's hitting threes. He's awkwardly getting to the hoop, but he's getting to the hoop and he's scoring. And like I said, the defense was awesome. He was a big spark plug for them. He's cheap, and they've still got 2 years left with the team option and everything where he's going to stay very cheap. Got to maximize that capability. If your starting 2 guard is only $2 million and he's effective, great. Absolutely great. Let's keep utilizing that. That's how we're avoiding the apron and stuff right now. So great. Let's maximize this right now and hope that we can keep developing this young fella, because man, was he exciting last year. But anyway, let's talk about the depth chart in itself. At the point guard spot, obviously De'Aaron Fox, always a potential all-star type player. Love him. Carter's going to be injured, and then you got McLaughlin, so you're a little bit thin here right now. It's not the greatest. It's not the greatest because you're banking a lot on a rookie. And at least, like I said, McLaughlin has experience, but not that great. You go to the shooting guard spot between Keon Ellis and Malik Monk, you're pretty undersized at the guard overall, which could have some defensive concerns. Fox and Keon in particular are pretty good defenders, so hopefully they can have enough switching between them. I don't know how many situations are going to be put into where that actually happens, but it's interesting nonetheless. Again, we like Malik Monk. We'll see what Kobe Jones turns into. We get to the wing. We got DeMar, you got Herter, and you got McDaniels. At least you have a little bit of size out there. Obviously, DeRozan's an upgrade for you. Hopefully, Kevin Herter could figure it out. Wouldn't be surprised if Kevin Herter really gets going if he were to replace Keon Ellis as a starting 2 in some capacity. And then I like just having McDaniels on the team just as a lengthy wing option. I think that's awesome. Did we just skip over Trey Lyles? I totally skipped over Trey Lyles over here. That's my bad. And you know what? That's such a testament to who Trey Lyles is. Trey Lyles is such a forgotten basketball player, and he's really quality. He's the definition of a 78 to 79 overall in NBA 2K. Just that's what he's going to be every year. He can put the ball on the floor a little bit, really smart, quality defender, can shoot the ball a little bit. He's just solid at everything. You could play him at center if you need to, probably best at a 4. He's a really nice option for them actually, and I wouldn't be surprised if they use him as a backup center more at times. But Trey Lyles, really, really like him as a backup. One of the better backups you can have. So between him and Keegan Murray, you've got a pretty good 4 rotation going on. So the forwards, actually pretty solid overall. You'd maybe hope for a little bit more athleticism and dynamicness, some guys that can get out and move a little bit more, but we'll take what we get. Obviously, it's at center. You got Sabonis. That's awesome. And then you get a little bit questionable with Len and Robinson. So maybe we can find a way to get something going out of that. I don't necessarily know, but regardless, that's who you got. So let's explore this. So I always do this in the videos. I want to explore a trade, maybe or two, of some potential moves that could help this team improve in some capacity. And obviously want to hear your guys' ideas. Feel free to join the Discord and talk about those as well. We have a place where you can post your trade ideas and we'll discuss them. So you guys let us know at the end of the day. But let's go into Fanspo and talk about some trade ideas. Alrighty, so we're back here on Fanspo, and I've got a couple ideas, and they actually revolve around the same player in Kevin Huerter. One of them I think you guys will actually really love. I'll be surprised if you guys don't like this. It involves the Portland Trailblazers. And no, it's not Jeremy Grant, because I think that's where a lot of you think I'm going with this. No. We all know there was somebody on the Portland Trailblazers that the Kings very much wanted to add to this team. And it's a guy by the name of Chris Murray, the brother of Keegan Murray. I think that'd be great for the team to bring him in. It's a young player, right? It's a guy to pair with Keegan, keep him happy and everything, but we don't want to just do that in itself, right? So we're moving Kevin Huerter over here. We're moving Chris Murray over to the team, but the Portland Trailblazers have another problem where they have way too many big men on this team, especially when they're trying to develop Donovan Clingan. They have DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams, and Clingan. They're probably not trading Ayton or Clingan, right? Leaves Rob Will as an interesting option, coming off the bench. Bring him to Sacramento. The money, pretty dang close and can work out. What does Portland get out of this? They get Kevin Huerter, who is much more of a conducive type player to help Scoot Henderson develop. They need another spacing wing on the team. I think this is a great use of their assets. Let's try this trade out. Perfect success. Maybe you throw like a second round pick or something like that in, like going to the Trailblazers or something like that, because you're taking one of their former first round picks, and Robert Williams is, when he's healthy, a defensive player of the year candidate, literally at times. But I think that's an interesting trade in itself. Again, that would kind of bolster the backup center position. You could release Orlando Robinson so you could still have a roster space open. This actually saves you a little bit of money, which is cool. And then you have Chris Murray on the team who you can develop. He's playing with his brother Keegan again. Maybe he plays better because of it. Let's try one more deal. So this is the other move I kind of wanted to try. I feel like the Wizards are missing on the wing position a decent amount, and we could kind of kill two birds with one stone on this one as well. So this is a very similar trade. So Kevin Huerter would again then be moving over here. And then what if we threw like a Rashawn Holmes in this? It's not the best use of cap space in the world, and this is going to cost us a little bit more money. But again, like, the trade works. You get another center. Rashawn Holmes played really well when he was in Sacramento once upon a time. Probably not that great nowadays. Maybe you don't want him locked up for another 2-ish years. I'm actually kind of curious. What is his contract look like? 2025, 26. Only $250K is guaranteed, so you could actually release him if you really need to. So that's actually not as bad of a deal as I would have thought that it would be. So I think this is a decent move. You get a Corey Kispert, who you know is going to be a lockdown shooter. Not quite maybe as dynamic possibly as like a Kevin Huerter on defense, but nonetheless, I think it'd be a good option. It's a proven shooter, so I like it. I actually like this kind of move, and I think that either of these could be decent ideas for the Kings. Alrighty, with that being said, let's make our way over to the rotation. So I always put a question mark in this part just because I'm like, look, I don't know what they're actually going to do. These are just my thoughts at the end of the day as to like, hey, you know, when we start out a season as coaches, we usually are like, hey, what kind of minutes do we kind of want guys floating around? Just because, like, obviously there's going to be nights where they got to play 40 minutes. There's going to be nights where they don't play as much because we're either getting blown out or blowing someone else out. So where do we kind of want their average to fall? And this is kind of what I'm thinking for the time being. De'Aaron Fox playing a lot of minutes. We don't have a lot of options at point guard right now. I know Devin Carter is hurt. This is where we'd ideally like to have him at a certain point. I know, it's kind of scary to look at, but look, you're going to have to play him a lot of minutes if you want to succeed. There's not a ton of depth on this team, and he's one of your best players, so you got to play him, right? He's still got some youth in him, so he's fine. Keon Ellis playing about 24 minutes a game, so obviously Malik Monk is getting a little bit more because he's the better player, but he's going to play starter ball for us as more of a defensive option around Fox and Sabonis. So 24 minutes there. DeRozan still getting a quality 32 minutes, same with Keegan Murray and Sabonis. Again, just being quality wings and forwards for us. Talked about Malik Monk getting solid minutes. Kevin Huerter, again, you got to get him going right now, if anything, to improve his trade value, if nothing else. else, so he's getting decent minutes. I imagine Trey Lyles being like the first big off the bench, where again, he can play the power forward or the center, depending on if he's playing with Keegan or Sabonis. Luckily, he can space the floor and still be effective with the ball a little bit, so he's a little bit dynamic in that sense. Again, Devin Carter, get him back on the court, get him back up to speed and everything, give him about 10 minutes, and then Alex Len getting some big man cleanup minutes to give some guys a little bit extra rest. And then we got McLaughlin, McDaniels, Robinson, and Colby Jones kind of rounding out the rest of the team. Again, you've got an open roster spot, so you can play in the buyout market or take back an extra player. You can always cut Orlando Robinson if you want to keep that roster spot open as well. There's a lot you can do with this team, but let's go into their actual lineups and see what was working and what wasn't working for them last year. All right, so these were the Kings' rotation, their different five-man combinations last year. As you can see, not many negative ones. This one, they played a pretty good amount of minutes together, and it was pretty negative. This was Davion Mitchell at point guard, so I'm guessing that there's a correlation there that when De'Aaron Fox comes off the court, that they're just not as good. Let's see here. This one wasn't a ton of minutes, but this one had De'Aaron Fox. This one had De'Aaron Fox. This one didn't, so maybe it's a hypothesis for the time being. This one doesn't include Fox. This one does. Fox is on the court a lot, so maybe that's not as big of a thing necessarily. But interesting enough, with Kevin Huerter, he struggled a bit last season with Harrison Barnes, so kind of interesting there. This one was negative and had a good amount of minutes as well. What was the difference here? Interesting. This was kind of their closing lineup. Wasn't very good because it has Fox, Monk, Barnes, Keegan, and Sabonis. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Then we get into some positive rotations with Fox, Duarte, Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, Sabonis. Interesting. This is where they figured out Keon Ellis was their starter, so this became their final starting lineup. They had a good amount of minutes here. This one looked pretty good. It was at least a +1. It wasn't great, but at least it was positive, so we'll assume some growing pains in there. This one had a decent amount of minutes as well. Davion Mitchell, Monk, Barnes, Keegan Murray, Sabonis. We're seeing Keegan Murray and Sabonis being a theme so far. A ton of minutes here and +5, so that's interesting. Fox, Huerter, Barnes, Keegan Murray, Sabonis. So kind of original starting five, if you will. So what does that tell us? That tells us that while Huerter wasn't necessarily hitting a ton, he was still like affecting their gravity and things like that. So Huerter still was like a net positive in that sense. You move up to this lineup here and you see Huerter and Duarte still types of gravity guys. This lineup they used a lot. This was with Keon Ellis playing like the point guard. So that's kind of interesting. Is there an opportunity for him to play a little bit of point guard early on this season? We don't know. Their best lineup didn't play a ton of minutes, but Huerter, Trey Lyles, Davion, Malik Monk, Sabonis. Interesting. Let's go to their three-man combinations. Which were the best ones? Let's sort it this way. There we go. So Harrison Barnes, Keon Ellis, and Sabonis. Wasn't a ton of minutes, but that one was their best one. Fox, Huerter, Sabonis. Fox, Huerter, Murray. Fox, Murray, Sabonis. Fox, Lyles, Monk. Okay, so De'Aaron Fox, obviously a correlation with a lot of these. That makes a lot of sense. Their worst three-man combo was Fox, Monk, and Barnes. That's interesting. Maybe we're not giving Harrison Barnes enough credit for not being as effective last year. I don't know. That's kind of interesting to talk about. Best two-man combinations, if you're curious. Fox and Lyles, Lyles and Monk. Interesting enough. This is what I'm saying. Trey Lyles just makes a difference when he's out there. So I don't know. That's kind of interesting to look at, in my opinion, because like then you go back and like look at this rotation and what does that kind of tell us, right? Maybe Keon Ellis needs to play a little bit of point guard until Devin Carter can come back or something. Where does DeMar DeRozan fit into this? Is he going to be something that can improve that where Harrison Barnes was struggling a little more or a little bit more? I don't know. One thing I do want to look at, though, because it seemed like Kevin Huerter was a part of a lot of these positive rotations, and I think, again, that's just the respect that he's earned in the league so far. So let's go take a look at some of his shooting numbers. So Kevin Huerter did a pretty good job of following an analytical system still, which is good, right? Like, we didn't see any abnormalities out of him. That's good to see. We just see some cold areas. And by the way, the cold is in comparison to league average. So he was below average in a couple different spots. He was really good in two spots in particular. And he was still pretty good at when he did get to the rim. He didn't get there a ton, but, you know, he made it work nonetheless. I'd probably like to see this sprinkled down even just a little bit less. These are pretty small data points at the end of the day, but regardless, like Sabonis is operating around here. So what can we kind of do to make that better? So if we can just get back to like more of an average in these spots, this could be a really big play for them because we've already seen like his gravity is so felt still. So if he's converting on some of these shots that he missed last year, we feel pretty good about it. Anyway, let's get on to like standing predictions. Alrighty, Kings fans, where do we think we're gonna fall? A little bit of a review in the West right now. We've got the Mavericks at 2, we got Grizzlies, Lakers, Spurs, Warriors not even in the play-in. Where did the Sacramento Kings fall? When I press this button, it's going to reveal it. So drum roll, please. I decided I'm not going to do audio for this at all because I think that's dumb and we're trying to be authentic on this channel. They are a 5 seed. I've got Sacramento at the 5, and I know this is going to cause controversy because there's going to be some people that say this is just right, too high and too little. And that's why I was looking forward to this video, because I want to see the discussion take place with this team. I think this is interesting. I think they've got a good team. I think they're much improved. Not much improved, but they're improved from last season. And there's a lot that you can do with this roster still. And the GM's been doing a pretty good job of making things happen. Like the starting 5 and like the first like guy or 2 off the bench, potentially 3, pretty solid, right? You talk about like the Malik Monks, the Kevin Herters, if he gets back to where he was, and Trey Lyles. You feel pretty good about your rotation up to that point. It's pretty clear when we looked at the rotations where things were working and where they weren't working, which is good. So if you can remain healthy, I don't see why this team can't be one of the teams that avoids the play-in and stuff this season. I think they've got enough talent, and they've got some very clutch players and some mature players on the team. I think they can get it done. Are they true contenders? Hard to say. It's really, really hard to say, but I'm interested nonetheless, and I want to hear from you guys, particularly in the comments down below. Make sure you go leave me one. It's my favorite part of my job. Just make sure when you do it that you guys aren't being like derogatory towards anybody. I will hide you if that happens, because I don't want my channel to be like the rest of the internet where people just come in and they're like, this guy's garbage. Well, guess what, person with no name and no face? You don't get to talk here anymore. But nonetheless, I'm really, really excited to keep this series going. I'm going to go back to laying in my bed now and just blowing my nose constantly. But hey, seriously, I appreciate you guys as always. We'll talk to you later. Thanks so much. Bye.